If the world has been loud today, this one is quiet. No stages, no kisscams, just a woman in a garden, watching the man she loved rewrite forever. This is a soft story, but it changed history. If you're still awake, if the dishes are still drying in the rack, and your mind won't quite tuck itself in, come sit beside me. This isn't a story about war, though he waged many. It isn't about power, though he carried it like a second skin. No, this is about her, the woman who loved him, even after he forgot how to say her name out loud. This is a story about a crown and the woman who helped him wear it. It is about a garden and the letters no one asked to be returned. It is about betrayal, not in a letter, but in a ceremony. And it begins not with a battle, but with roses. Her name was Joséphine, and before she was an empress, before the palace, before the titles, she was a widow, with debts and soft eyes, and the kind of charm that didn't need permission. When they met, he was not yet Napoleon, not the man the world feared, but a soldier with ambition in his boots and something like hunger in his stare. He fell hard, too hard perhaps. He wrote letters so fevered they blistered the page. "I wake filled with you," he once scribbled, "your image and the memory of last night's intoxicating pleasures." He called her my little Joséphine. Though she was older, wiser, and far more beloved than he knew how to handle, they married in secret. She was late to the ceremony, an omen, if ever there was one. She wore a muslin gown, the colour of faded cream, threaded with tiny pearls, not for extravagance, but because she knew the weight of elegance. He sent her violets every year on their anniversary, even after. Well, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Their early days were all fire. He begged her to write. She forgot, or chose not to. She had affairs. He had campaigns. The marriage was a garden left untended, but not unloved. When he rose, so did she. Paris watched her glide into rooms. Like silk, had learned how to breathe. She wasn't noble by blood, but she had the air of it. More importantly, she had connections, the kind that whispered behind doors and clinked glasses at just the right moment. She hosted salons, flirted with diplomats, wore gowns so sheer they made bishops blush. She was, in every way, the woman who made him look like more than a general. She made him look like a man worthy of an empire. And then he built one. When he crowned himself emperor, he took the laurel from the Pope's hand and placed it on his own head. But then he turned and crowned her with both hands, gently, as if she were a prayer he wasn't sure he should be saying. The world watched. She knelt in front of him, draped in velvet and diamonds, but it was her eyes that mattered. They were not triumphant. They were trying not to cry, because she knew, even then, that forever was beginning to rot at the edges. She had not given him a son, and history, for all its drama, is terribly predictable. He needed an heir. She had only given him loyalty and grace and the illusion of belonging. He wrote again, but this time not to her, and one cold afternoon he gathered the court and read aloud a statement of divorce. She sat beside him, silent, her gloved hands folded in her lap, like a petition she knew wouldn't be granted. "With the permission of our well-beloved spouse," he said, as if her heart had signed the paperwork. He would marry a girl of 18, a duchess, a womb. But here's what they don't print in history books. After the grand goodbye, after the throne was made smaller by someone else's presence, he kept visiting her. Secretly, softly. Her roses, the ones she planted herself at Malmaison, bloomed long after he was exiled, long after the empire collapsed, long after the girl with the hair turned to stone. She was never empress again, but she was never forgotten. And when he died, alone on a wet rock in the middle of the sea, the last word on his lips was not victory. It was France, the army, Joséphine. This story doesn't rush. It opens like perfume on warm skin. Slow, familiar, a little bitter. Because love that leaves a legacy is never simple. And what Joséphine gave Napoleon wasn't just her heart, it was her silence. After the divorce, she didn't fall apart. Not the way he expected. She moved to Château de Malmaison, a country estate where roses bloomed even in winter, and parakeets nested beside bookshelves, lined with her favourite tragedies. It was there she built her second life, quietly, without a crown, without scandal, without him. She tended to her gardens as if pruning the parts of herself he never understood. She named flowers, fed the swans, wrote letters to her children with ink that dried in gentle curves. Her room smelled of orange blossoms and parchment. She had a harp she never played in front of anyone, and her favourite pair of slippers were embroidered with violets, his flower. Still, Napoleon kept her letters. Every one. Even after he remarried, even after the child was born, he kept a bundle of her notes, tied with silk string, in the drawer beside his campaign maps. The man who restructured Europe still read her words when the war tents were quiet. And once, only once, he wrote her again. "You are the only woman who ever truly governed me. Not with force, but with stillness." Marie-Louise, his new wife, was everything a royal alliance demanded. Young, fertile, politically convenient. She bore him a son, and history books called it a success. But what they don't say is that Napoleon never brought her violets, never whispered her name before battle, never visited her in dreams, as he claimed Joséphine did, until the day he died. The new empress was a duty, the old one, a ghost that lingered, perfumed and patient. Unlike him, Joséphine never gave speeches, never defended herself. She did not write memoirs, or publish letters, or leak secrets to the salons of Paris. She just waited, with dignity, until time did what time always does. It peeled back the lies and left only the bones of truth. People began to visit Malmaison. Writers, artists, young women with too much sadness in their eyes and not enough scandal in their diaries. She fed them tea and warned them to marry carefully, not upward, but kindly. One winter evening, Joséphine sat beside her window and watched the garden. Snow had fallen, a quiet sheet across the roses. She took out a box. Inside, a letter from him, a lock of his hair, And the broken clasp from the coronation gown she hadn't touched in 20 years. She held the clasp for a long while and smiled, not because she missed him, but because, for one brief, blazing moment in history, he had belonged to her. She wrote him a final letter that night. It was never posted. It was found, decades later, inside the drawer of a writing desk, carved with violets and swans. It read, "You were never mine to keep, but for a moment, the world mistook you for a man in love. I forgive you for not staying, but not for forgetting. May your next forever be quieter. Joséphine died in May of 1814. Chest infection. Too many damp days. Too many unspoken things." She had spent the afternoon walking with the Tsar of Russia, still captivating, still luminous. He sent flowers to her funeral. Napoleon was not allowed to attend, but he wore black. For weeks, the last order he gave before his exile was that violets be placed at her tomb every year, without fail. If you're still with me, thank you for not skipping to the end. This story doesn't scream. It lingers in mirrors, in perfume bottles, in crownless women with backbones made of silk. After her death, the house remained. Malmaison became a museum of sorts, not of politics, but of personal things. Her gloves, still creased, her harp untouched, a handkerchief with his initials, frayed at the edge from years of silent folding. One room held her collection of perfumes, each labelled in her handwriting, for morning, for after letters, for when the news is bad. And in the garden, the violets never stopped blooming, even when no one was left to explain why. Years later, a composer came to Malmaison. He didn't speak much, but he walked through every room with his hat in his hand and tears he didn't try to hide. He asked to sit at her writing desk. He didn't write music that day. He just whispered. She softened a man the world thought unbreakable. He left behind a melody, just a few bars, titled, "For her garden, her daughter, Hortense, wore violets in her hair on her wedding day. Her grandson would grow up to be Napoleon the But it was Joséphine's kindness, not her husband's ambition, that shaped him. In family portraits, her image stayed on the mantelpiece, even when political winds changed. The men of her life ruled, marched, and fell. But it was the woman with soft eyes and silent strength, whose memory refused to leave. After exile, Napoleon grew smaller, not just in power, but in presence. The letters stopped. The public faded. The man who once made kings bow now had only books and regrets and the names he whispered when no one was near. France, the army, Joséphine, 3 names. Only one of them ever loved him, without asking for something back. There's a thing about women who've been loved publicly and left quietly. The world remembers them wrong, as muses, or mistakes, or stepping stones. But Joséphine was none of those. She was the original forever. The promise, the softness he tried to carve into something strategic. And when the empire fell, when the marble cracked, and history started cleaning up the mess, it was her name that remained, soft, on the lips of time. That's the most confounding thing about her story. She never wrote back in anger, never published a scathing diary, never corrected the gossip. She simply stayed kind and let time do the talking. She let the kiss cam pan away. She let the replacement wave from the balcony. She let the music swell for someone else. And still, she stayed remembered, not as the empress who was left, but as the woman he never quite left behind. If this story softens something in you, if you've ever watched someone walk away and smiled anyway, you are not alone. Joséphine never got the kiss cam moment. No spotlight, no crowd roaring her name, but she got the long version, the quiet legacy, the violet that outlasted the crown. And sometimes that's the better ending. If you're still here, tell me, what stayed with you? Was it the letter she never sent? The clasp she held in the dark? The violet beside his bed? Or maybe you saw yourself in the stillness of a woman who was left, but never really gone. Leave a comment. Tell me your favorite line, or where you're listening from. Toronto, Marseille, the garden she never stopped tending. And if you want to stay close to stories like this, subscribe. There's always one more waiting.